Today is December 5th, 2025. For the past year, we have been watching, we have been reading, we have been counting. We conducted an extensive study of TVNZ's political coverage. Our analysis ran from December 2024 through to this month, December 2025. The goal was simple. We wanted to understand the nature of the content being presented to New Zealanders. We asked two fundamental questions. First, how much of the coverage was straightforward, factual news, and how much was opinion or analysis? Second, did the overall body of work show a discernible leaning for or against the current national-led coalition government? The answers we found are in the data: 90% opinion analysis versus 10% pure news. The numbers are clear. They provide a stark picture of the media landscape. We did not set out to prove a pre-existing belief. To ensure our study was robust, we first had to establish comprehensive access to the source material. We did not rely on summaries or second-hand reports. Our team monitored TVNZ's output in real time. This included every political headline published on the TVNZ website, every article, every news bulletin broadcast on television. We also included their flagship current affairs program, Q+A. We systematically analyzed the interviews. We analyzed the panel discussions. This multi-platform approach provided us with thousands of individual data points. Our final dataset was built directly from this raw live material. It was collected as it was published and broadcast to the New Zealand public throughout the year. The core of our methodology was a strict and consistently applied rule for classification. We separated factual reporting from content that included interpretation. We divided every single item into one of two distinct categories. The first category was pure news. For an item to qualify as pure news, it had to contain only verifiable facts. It had to describe an event, what happened, where it happened, and when. Crucially, these pieces could not include quotes offering reaction. Now, we turn to the principal findings. The numbers reveal a dramatic disparity between the two categories we measured. Across the full 12-month period of our study, items that qualified as pure news consistently made up a very small fraction of TVNZ's total political coverage. The data shows this portion was between 8% and 11%. This means that for every 10 political stories presented to the public, only one, on average, consisted of just the basic, unadorned facts of an event. This is a strikingly low figure, suggesting that the model of simply reporting what has occurred has become a rarity in the modern news cycle. The unavoidable conclusion, therefore, is that the vast majority of content falls into our second category. Between 89% and 92% of all political coverage produced by TVNZ over the last year was, by our strict definition, opinion analysis. This is the central finding of our entire study. It signifies a fundamental characteristic of the content provided. Most stories presented to the public were not just reports, they were packages. They were constructed with reactions, interpretations, and commentary woven directly into the narrative. This is not to say the facts were absent, but that they were rarely, if ever, presented alone. They came bundled with a layer of analysis. This enormous gap between pure news and opinion-driven content is significant. It means that the public is almost constantly exposed to a framework or a lens through which they are encouraged to view political events. The act of choosing which quotes to include, which experts to consult, and which reactions to highlight inherently shapes the audience's understanding. When nearly 9 out of every 10 stories contain these elements, the editorial choices about whose opinions matter most become incredibly powerful. Having established that nearly 90% of political coverage was opinion or analysis, our next step was to examine the nature of that content. It is one thing to have a lot of opinion. It is another to see which way that opinion leans. We conducted a tone analysis on this vast majority of stories. We categorized each piece as anti-government, pro-government, neutral. Anti-government, criticism of policies, actions, ministers. Pro-government, support or positive framing. Neutral, balanced or process-focused reporting. The results were revealing. 35 to 45% of opinion pieces had an anti-government slant. These featured voices of opposition, critical experts, affected stakeholders. By contrast, only 10 to 15% were pro-government. The remainder were neutral. Combined volume and tone show a threefold to fourfold prevalence of anti-over-pro. Over a year, this creates an overall impression of a moderately left-leaning or anti-coalition narrative. This aligns with broader sentiment. A 2025 Trust in News survey found 68% of New Zealanders reported distrust in the news media. A search on X for TVNZ bias over the past year showed about 80% of posts accused a left-wing or anti-coalition bias. To see how these patterns played out in practice, we examined 3 high-profile news stories from late 2025. The first case was the school lunch scandal, dubbed the Mouldy Mint story. This issue dominated TVNZ's coverage for a full week. Our analysis showed 80% of that coverage was opinion and analysis. Of that, 50% was framed with a distinctly anti-government tone. The story became a vehicle for extensive criticism, with more time given to reaction than procurement facts. The second case was coverage of the HE Koi protesting the Treaty Principles Bill. Coverage framed it as conflict over fundamental Maori rights. Reporting focused on protesters, their emotional appeals, and criticism of the government's motives. Very little coverage explained the proposed bill in neutral detail. The emphasis made the story driven by opinion, not policy reporting. The third area was education policy, sampled over several months. We found 73% of education stories focused on removing treaty obligations from the curriculum. Within that subset, 64% carried an anti-government tone. Those stories highlighted criticism from teaching unions, academics, Maori leaders. Conversely, 27% covered other initiatives like improved literacy and numeracy, expansion of charter schools. Those positive stories were fewer and more neutral. Across all 3 cases, the data shows a consistent method. Story selection and framing prioritized conflict and criticism. Coverage volume favored reaction and analysis over factual reporting. Voices critical of the national-led coalition were featured more often and more prominently than supporters. We must be clear about what this study does and does not say. It is a quantitative analysis of TVNZ's published content over a 1-year period. It does not speculate on the intent or the motivations of individual journalists or editors. It does not assign blame for the choices that were made. It simply records and measures what was broadcast and published. It is an objective count of the content itself. The limitations are clear. Our focus was on TVNZ alone, and we measured output, not impact. However, within these boundaries, the primary result is simple and indisputable. The key conclusion is this: TVNZ's political coverage in 2025 was overwhelmingly opinion-driven. Approximately 90% of all political items contained significant elements, reaction, commentary, analysis, placing them outside the category of pure news. Within that massive body of opinion-based content, the tone was measurably skewed. Pieces critical of the national-led coalition government outnumbered supportive pieces by a ratio of roughly 3-to-1. When opinion makes up the vast majority of coverage, its collective tone becomes the outlet's effective stance. In this case, the data shows the stance was one of persistent criticism,